Hello everyone and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Wednesday, October 10th, 2018. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the latest film and TV news, and in our feature presentation, we'll talk about visiting the set of Pet Sematary. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief, Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And Slash Film Writer Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
How's it going, guys? It is officially the hump day of the week, and news isn't really stopping, is it? Let's jump into it with yesterday it was reported that Annapurna was dropping out of the Untitled Fox News movie, and we heard it was over budgetary problems, and now we have learned a little bit more about this, and it's kind of depressing news. Ben, tell us about it.
Yeah, it sounds like things at Annapurna Pictures may be a little bit more dire than anybody thought. So this company launched in 2011, and Megan Ellison, who's the daughter of Larry Ellison, who's a billionaire who founded a company called Oracle that runs Java and all sorts of things that are in the background of all of your computers. Like, Megan Ellison is super rich and has been sort of like a savior for auteur-driven filmmaking ever since she launched Annapurna Pictures, because she's basically been backing all of these visionary filmmakers and giving them financing to make the movies that they want to make that traditional studios would probably have a problem financing. So movies like The Master and Spring Breakers and Zero Dark 30 and The Grandmaster and Everybody Wants Some and tons of great films over the past few years have come through Annapurna Pictures. But now a new report at the Wrap says that the company seems to be in some financial trouble, and that might explain why they had to walk away from not only this Untitled Fox News movie that you just mentioned, but also a Jennifer Lopez film called The Hustlers at Scores, which they also sort of parted ways from yesterday. According to the Wrap, Megan Ellison is reevaluating the studio's film division and is expected to take a more active role in day-to-day development and production after a rocky 18 months for the company. So they released Catherine Bigelow's period piece Detroit, and that movie, despite costing like $40 million to make, only made about $16 million. So that's apparently that film cost Annapurna Pictures tens of millions of dollars, so that's kind of a hard hit for a smaller company like that. There's been a lot of rumors going back and forth about whether they are in real trouble. A spokesperson for Annapurna denied any problems, said that all of these rumors are unfounded and that everything is sort of business as usual at the company, but there are multiple sources from the Wrap that say otherwise. Also, their chief financial officer and the president of Annapurna Pictures left the company not too long ago, and the president of film, Chelsea Barnard, just left that job too. So, it's not great going over there at Annapurna Pictures right now, and I'm really hoping that they can pull out of this because, like I said, this company has been sort of a bright light in a movie landscape that's full of superhero movies and sequels and stuff that we love. But I've been very glad to see their output over recent years, and I'm sure you guys probably agree with that. I can't imagine that any hardcore film lover would be happy if Annapurna Pictures went away.
Yeah, and before this, Megan Ellison was a producer on many films from, auteur filmmakers. It just seems like to me that this usually happens in Hollywood. Usually someone with, big money and ambition comes to try to make a difference, and then they find out that, general audience, mainstream America doesn't want to see, a $60 million Paul Thomas Anderson film. And they end up, producing more mainstream movies. Do you think this could happen to Ellison?
Man, I hope not, because like I said, I love the idea of a super rich person who basically is in it for the love of the game and not necessarily caring as much about movies, just coming in and funding these visions that other studios wouldn't necessarily do. But Chris, what do you think is the end game here?
I don't know, and I wonder how this is going to affect. They have several movies out this year. I mean, they have If Beale Street Could Talk coming out soon. That's like a huge, potential Oscar film. Like, I'm wondering if this is going to hurt campaigning for that. Like, if they're not going to be able to afford to, push that for, the Oscar votes. I don't know. It's a very unfortunate situation.
Yeah, I also wonder if, like other studios, let's say Fox, for instance. Fox does the big comic book stuff, the X-Men movies and stuff, and they do that to help fund, Fox Searchlight, which does the small stuff. I feel like eventually it's going to have to get to the point where Annapurna, if they want to function, is going to have to operate in that kind of, one for them, two for us kind of.
Well, the good news there is that they have acquired the distribution rights for the next James Bond movie. So that is something that, theoretically could sort of put them in that position like you're talking about. And Bond films typically tend to perform pretty well financially. So that could be, if the next Bond movie is a hit, that could be something that could fund some of these, smaller auteur-driven projects. Although it actually sounds like the new Bond movie directed by Cary Fukunaga might be like an auteur-driven Bond film. So, maybe they're having their cake and eating it too a little bit with that one.
Let's move on to our next story, and that involves the Universal Soldier franchise. A franchise I have actually, I think I've only seen the first film, but they've made, 3 or 4 of those, Chris?
There are 4. Well, technically there's 6, but 2 of them are like TV movies. So they don't really count. So 4 is the official number.
Well, there's another reboot in the works, and you wrote this up for the site. What do we know?
So Richard Wenk, who is the guy who wrote The Equalizer and The Equalizer 2, and he's also writing the upcoming Kraven the Hunter movie, is he announced that he's doing he calls it a reimagining of Universal Soldier. Universal Soldier was a 1992 film directed by Roland Emmerich, starring Dolph Lundgren and Jean-Claude Van Damme. They played Vietnam War soldiers who die and then get brought back to life in the 90s as sort of like not really robots, but like unbeatable super soldiers. And I won't call it a good movie. And it launched a franchise, and the franchise actually got weirdly entertaining as it went on. Part 2 isn't very good, but part 3 and 4 are surprisingly weird and very well directed and action packed. So take from that what you will. But anyway, this is a reimagining, and Wenk says, he makes it sound like it's really going to be Universal Soldier in name only. Like he was inspired by the title and little else. So, there's no talk on who's directing it or when it's coming out, but there it is.
I mean, what's your relationship with this franchise?
Like I said, I actually like the later films as, violent direct-to-VOD films. It's not like something that's like beloved. Like I'm not going to be furious about, some sort of... there's no way to betray the franchise. It's not like it's like high art or anything like that. But this really just sounds like they're literally just taking the name and just making a movie with that title. But we'll see.
I think I've seen all of them.
Oh, you have?
Actually,
okay.
Like even the TV ones, because my friend and I, when we were in college, we were like, all right, let's just do it. Let's marathon all of these Universal Soldier movies. And it was a terrible experience because they're mostly really, really bad films. But I
wait a second. So you decide this, and then you get through like 1 or 2 of them. At what point don't you why didn't you say let's stop here? I don't think we need to go further.
I think it was like, I don't know. I think it was some sort of like internal competition between the two of us, like who could outlast the other in watching these, if we could make it to the end. It was like a challenge kind of thing. I don't know. It was really bad. I take that back. I don't think I saw the most recent one, but I definitely saw Universal Soldier Day of Reckoning, the 2012 one. And I agree with Chris. That one is like surprisingly well directed. And it seems like, people who are into the direct to video action market, with anybody who knows who Scott Adkins is, basically, those people will probably really appreciate that film, because there's a ton of action in that movie that's it's way different than the first film.
Okay, let's move on to our next bit of news, and this involves that streaming service that we talked about, I think, last week, from Jeffrey Katzenberg and Meg Whitman. This is a streaming service that's going to concentrate on short-form content under 10 minutes or less, I believe. They've racked up a whole lot of big-name auteur filmmakers to develop content for this, and they even have a new name. Ben, tell us about it.
Yeah, so it was formerly known as New TV. You may have heard us talk about that in the past.
That was a horrible idea for a name. Like, they must have come up with something better, right?
They came up with something, Peter, but it's certainly not better. It's called Quibi, Q-U-I-B-I, which is short for Quick Bites, as in quick bites of content. This is a laughable name.
That name is going to be so popular with the millennials. You can just hear them talking about Snapchat and the Quibi, checking up on the Quibi.
I mean, Jeffrey Katzenberg and Meg Whitman, the CEO of the company, they announced this at the Vanity Fair New Establishment Summit, which is like basically like a conference that's been going on recently, and there's tons of streaming news that has come out of this. But I guess on the stage, Meg Whitman said, like, Jeffrey Katzenberg loves the name. He can't stop saying Quibi. And I'm like, he's probably the only one. He must have fallen in love with this name and just convinced everyone to go along with it, because this is like Quickster all over again. Like, I can't imagine anybody thinking that this is a great name for a streaming platform. But anyway, they decided to go with it. So in addition to unveiling this name, they actually revealed the names of a few more collaborators that are going to be producing content for this network when it, I guess it's supposed to launch sometime in 2019. So we already knew that Sam Raimi was announced, and I think Chris talked about that on a recent episode about how Raimi is developing a show called 50 States of Fear, which is going to highlight the scariest folklore from each state in America. But there are a few other names that came out today. Jason Blum, the producer of movies like Get Out and Halloween, is working on a show called Wolves and Villagers, which Jeffrey Katzenberg described as Fatal Attraction 2.0. Antoine Fuqua, the director of Training Day and Equalizer, is developing a modern telling of the movie Dog Day Afternoon and is eyeing 2 A-list actors for the lead roles in that. And Guillermo del Toro is working on content for them as well. We don't know any details about the show that he's working on, although Variety actually said that he's working on multiple projects for them. So that's interesting. And I mean, this basically just goes right back to the same conversation that you guys had on that recent episode of the podcast about, like, do people really want to watch short form content that's 10 minutes long and pay for it? Because as you guys mentioned, I think it's supposed to be like an $8 tier for an ad-free experience, or maybe a $5 tier for being able to watch this stuff with ads. So that's all we know right now. That's the extent of the new news. Although actually there's one more tiny bit of information, and that is that each episode of these shows is, like I said, going to be about 10 minutes long, and all of the projects that I just mentioned are aiming for a total running time of somewhere between 2 and 4 hours. So we could be looking at 12 episodes for a 2-hour show and 24 episodes for a 4-hour show.
So the same as normal television, but just in 10-minute bites. Do these names get you excited for the service, Ben?
I mean, Del Toro is certainly somebody who I think all of us are, we raise an eyebrow anytime a project gets mentioned with his name attached to it. But he's also, notoriously one of the most busy people in Hollywood, and he always is attaching himself to projects that never actually come to fruition. So I think of all of these, I would be the least surprised if that one never happened, or the ones that he's associated with. The Sam Raimi one about the folklore, the scary folklore from each state, sounds kind of cool. Jason Blum, I mean, he's a smart guy, and I don't know about a remake of Dog Day Afternoon in 10-minute chunks. That one sounds like the weirdest of these to me. But I don't know, Chris, what do you think about this?
I don't. The concept that they're going to just have these end up being 2 hours in total anyway makes it even dumber to me. Like, so they're really just taking like a 2-hour movie and breaking it up into 10-minute chunks. That's what this sounds like. And
well, I don't think that's what it's going to be, because I think
if that's what they're doing with Dog Day Afternoon, it sounds like. I mean, that's a full movie. Are they literally just breaking that up into 10-minute episodes? That sounds terrible.
I would assume that the end of every 10-minute episode is going to have some kind of cliffhanger or something that makes you want to watch the next episode. So it's going to be like written in a way almost like a comic book, I think.
I don't know. Like, to me, this sounds like watching a movie and pausing it every 10 minutes to go to the bathroom, and then you come back and hit play, and that just sounds awful.
Yeah, because Peter, if it's the way that you're talking about, they're going to have to basically they're going to have to come up with a new form of screenwriting where it's like the acts are so much shorter than they are in a traditional piece of storytelling, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that could be what they're doing.
Well, there is a whole popular thing in screenwriting called the sequence approach. And it's a lot of people look at Toy Story 1 in the sequence approach because every 15 minutes, like a new thing is introduced, and it's basically a whole new motivating factor that it goes to build up. Like, still the 3-act structure is still there, but I don't know. I think it still could be done in the same way, which I guess probably hurts my argument that it's something new and different. But I don't know. I think it's exciting that there's a company willing to pay all these great filmmakers to produce content that might be stuff that couldn't otherwise be made in Hollywood. You know, I guess maybe Dog Day Afternoon could be made elsewhere. But, you know, some of these, I'm sure whatever Guillermo del Toro has up his sleeve is something that, you know, probably couldn't fit in another, you know, in an hour-long drama, or, you know, it's something unique to this format. My big problem with this, I think, is the big problem I know both of you have with this, is that you have to pay to watch it. And, you know, there's so many streaming services coming out, and we're going to have to be paying for all of them. I feel like a lot of people are, I feel like a lot of these companies are missing out on this whole freemium concept where, you know, we can watch it for free with ads supported and then pay to, you know, avoid the ads or, you know, get the content early or something like that. And I feel like something like this, these filmmakers' names, and even Dog Day Afternoon, you know, franchises like that. Is that a franchise? I guess it's not a franchise because it's only one film.
Movie,
IP like that is not enough to get people to pay $5 a month. But I think if they were able to get this for free with, you know, ad supported in some way, then maybe they would be willing to eventually. Like me, I feel like, Ben, maybe you could get sucked in if you know, got the chance to, you know,
yeah, if you get the taste for free, yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm certainly, you know, even though I like a lot of the people involved in this announcement, I do find myself, you know, a little gun shy on pulling the trigger on subscribing to yet another service. It's like there are already ones that I would like to subscribe to that I just either can't afford at this very second, or I'm trying to, you know, organize in the long list, the ever-growing list of services that are coming out, and try to prioritize which ones I want to get next. And this one, I have to admit, is like, even though it has these great people attached to it, is pretty low on the list. So I don't know. I mean, best of luck to them. Like you're saying, it's always interesting to see a company like this, which just, by the way, has raised $1 billion in funding and has the backing of every major Hollywood studio attached to it already, trying to do something disruptive and interesting. And I hope it works, because it could be yet another way for storytellers to get their content out there and in front of people. But I just, at this stage, without having seen anything or exactly how it works, I don't know. I find it, I'm just a little hesitant at this point.
This is another thing that's kind of bothering me recently. Like, I'm watching so many shows that are streaming, and you binge watch them, and you're done with it in a day or two. And there isn't a lot of programming that I'm watching that have, you know, a new episode comes out each week. At this point, you know, every once in a while, like something like Westworld or Better Call Saul will come up where I'm following it week to week. And the thing that maybe excites me a little bit about this concept is maybe, you know, there could be a Guillermo del Toro a show that could have episodes coming out like every weekday or, you know, 3 times a week, and it would be something to look forward to. You know, on a regular basis, and not just like a binge watchable kind of thing. I feel like I'm missing the old days of scheduled TV, which I guess makes me old. I don't know. But, yeah, okay. Anyways, let's move on to the Spider-Man universe. There's a bunch of stories here talking about how Sony is intending to move forward with their Spider-Man-less, maybe, Spider-Man verse. Let's start first with Morbius. Chris, you wrote this up for the site. What do we know?
Yes, so Venom was a huge hit, and now we're stuck with Sony's whatever they're calling it. You don't want to call it the Spider-Verse because there's a movie called Into the Spider-Verse, and that's something different because that's apparently not in this universe because everything is very confusing and nothing makes sense now.
Wait until Warner Brothers gives you a Joker movie that's not connected to Suicide Squad 2 or the DCEU. Yeah.
It's a mess. I don't know what anyone is doing. But next up is Morbius, the living vampire, which will star Jared Leto. This had already been reported as likely to happen, and now we know it definitely is happening, and it's the next film for Sony, and Jared Leto is definitely attached. So it's going to start shooting probably in February or at the very least sometime early 2019. There aren't really specifics of, what's happening in the movie, but we know it's happening, and we know it's going to be part of this Venom universe, whatever it's called now.
For those of us who don't know who Morbius is, can you give us a quick explanation?
He is a scientist who becomes a vampire. That's the long and short of it. I mean, I've never read a Morbius comic, so I don't really know much about the character on my own. I had to look it up in writing the story, but yeah, he's a Nobel Prize winning biochemist who he has a debilitating blood disease, and he tries to treat that disease, and he accidentally turns himself into a vampire. So there you have it. It's a very scientifically accurate character.
If anybody grew up watching the Spider-Man animated series like I did, Morbius featured pretty heavily in at least one season of that show. So that's the primary knowledge point for me for coming into that character.
And I mentioned that Spider-Man could actually appear in this universe. I don't even know what do we want to call this, guys?
I think like 6 months ago, Sony put something out that said that they wanted to call it the SMU, the Sony Marvel Universe, but I don't think that stuck. I don't think anybody paid any attention to that, so I don't know.
That's what it says on Wikipedia. It says the Sony Marvel Universe, but I didn't use that because it just does not sound right. No one is calling it that, so yeah. Okay,
well, another property in development for the Sony Marvel Universe, yeah, I don't like this at all, is the Kraven the Hunter movie. And we've learned a little bit about that. Ben, tell us about it.
Yeah, so Richard Wenk, the same screenwriter that Chris mentioned earlier in today's podcast, is supposedly writing the Kraven the Hunter movie. And yes, this one is still happening as well. Kraven the Hunter, Sergei, a.k.a. Sergei Kravinoff, a hunter who basically becomes obsessed with hunting and tracking Spider-Man in the comics, is getting his own movie. And we've talked about it before, but now there's some new quotes from Richard Wenk, who's writing the film. And he says, I'm just starting it. It's an interesting world, a great character. It's going to adhere very closely to the lore of Kraven the Hunter, and he is going to come face to face with Spider-Man. I'm just beginning the process, and because it's a big IP Marvel world, there's lots of hurdles to overcome before you can start writing to crack the right story and get the right tone, blah, blah, blah. So basically the key piece of information there was that he is going to come face to face with Spider-Man in this movie. So I feel like, when I first read this, I was thinking of a shot where the character of Kraven sort of looks up and over the camera and, is like, oh my God, it's Spider-Man. But we, the audience, never actually see Spider-Man. So technically he could come face to face with that character. I feel like there's going to be something like that where it's sort of like a workaround and not actually, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, for example. It's literally on screen with this character because we know that, and I guess this is spoilers for Venom, a movie that I haven't even seen, but I've heard from everybody else that Spider-Man does not make a cameo in Venom. So you would think that if the Sony Marvel Universe was gearing up to have Spider-Man appear in all these movies. He would have appeared briefly in Venom, and as HT writes in this article, it would be kind of hilarious if Spider-Man showed up in a Kraven the Hunter movie but didn't show up in a Venom movie.
Yeah, I don't see Marvel Studios going along with this at all either. I mean, it's not like Venom probably gave them any confidence in what Sony is doing with their Sony Marvel universe.
The good old SMU.
SMU. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about Rambo 5, which is now has a title. Chris, tell us about it.
Yes, so Sylvester Stallone is in the midst of shooting Rambo 5, where Rambo looks like a cowboy now. And the movie is titled officially Rambo 5, Last Blood. And this makes sense because the first Rambo movie is called First Blood. It actually doesn't even have Rambo in the title. It's just called First Blood. And Rambo 2 is called Rambo First Blood Part 2. So it looks like the series is now coming to an end with this film, which has Rambo taking on a Mexican drug cartel. So make of that what you will. I have a bad feeling this is not going to turn out that well, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think they should remove the 5 from the title. It's cleaner that way. Rambo.
Yeah, it's a bit clunky. Rambo Last Blood would work a lot better, but I guess not.
I do like that title as much as I'm sure I'm not going to like this movie. But let's move on to our next story. And yesterday we talked about James Gunn possibly writing and directing a second Suicide Squad film, which might or might not be a sequel. We don't know. Now Dave Bautista, who was obviously Drax the Destroyer in Guardians of the Galaxy, is now campaigning to star in that movie. Ben, tell us about it.
Yeah, so he basically, I mean, the long and short of this story is that Dave Bautista, shared an article that revealed that information about James Gunn potentially coming on board Suicide Squad 2, and he said, "Where do I sign up?" So that's about it. Like there's nothing super serious involved here, but it would be really entertaining to see Dave Bautista make the jump from the Marvel universe to the DC universe. He would certainly not be the first actor to make that jump. Bautista, of course, has been very, very vocal in his support of James Gunn ever since Gunn was fired by Disney, and he's basically been the most vocal of the Guardians cast in support of his director because, and for good reason, James Gunn took a chance on him and gave him the career that he has right now. Obviously, Bautista was a wrestler beforehand, but there were some big name people who were auditioning for Drax the Destroyer. I remember seeing photos of Jason Momoa from Game of Thrones trying out for that role, and Gunn ended up liking what Bautista was doing with that part, and that role has completely changed his career trajectory. So it's not surprising that he would be so supportive of his friend and director. So I don't know, Peter, do you want to see Dave Bautista in Suicide Squad 2?
Well, I don't even know what James Gunn's Suicide Squad is, but I could imagine Dave Bautista as Lobo. Like, that feels like it would be a perfect fit. But I wanted to ask you, I know we've had people jump from Marvel to DC and DC to Marvel in, the acting world in the past, but we've never had have we not had anybody appear in both of the worlds at the same time? By that, I mean, while they're still a, big part of a big franchise in Marvel appear in DC? I can't think of anybody off the top of my head, and I know I'm probably wrong.
Yeah, I feel like it would be somebody small. It would be I know it's not Ray Stevenson, but it would be somebody like that, not necessarily one of the primary members of any of the casts. That's a good question.
I'm just wondering if there's a contract that will prevent him from being in a DC production while he's, still headlining Guardians of the Galaxy films.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they have some sort of exclusivity clause or something like that. That's if anybody out there is an entertainment lawyer, write in and let us know.
Yeah, I'd be interested. But Ben, we're going to leave you here. So tell us, where can people find more of your work online?
You can find me writing at slashfilm.com. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Ben Pears.
Okay, now it's time for our feature presentation. Chris, you got the chance to visit the set of Pet Sematary the new adaptation of Stephen King's novel. And when did this happen? Because we write about these things way after the fact.
This happened in the summer. I believe it was July is when it happened.
Oh, so not that long ago.
Yeah.
So tell us about it. I know you're a big Stephen King fan. You're a big horror fan. What was it like to step into the, an iconic story like that?
I mean, this was probably, like the coolest thing I have ever done. Like you said, I'm a huge Stephen King fan, and Pet Sematary is actually my favorite Stephen King novel. So I was already pretty hyped up about I was hyped about the project in general, and getting to go there and see, it being shot was pretty incredible. I have a lengthy set visit report on slashfilm.com that I really would encourage everyone to go read, because I worked really hard on it, and I want people to read this stuff. But going there was, it made me, even more confident in the film. Everyone involved with this project is taking it very seriously. Like, they're not just approaching this as, a cheap horror movie to make money. I mean, on some level, that's what they want. They want to make money, as all movies do, but they're really approaching this as this sort of like serious drama that just happens to be, a horror movie. And I loved that approach. I love that they're treating this as like a real movie, for lack of a better word, where this isn't like, this isn't like the older Stephen King adaptations, which you could tell were being made very cheaply, very quickly, just to cash in on the Stephen King brand. And, again, I'm not naive. I know, because it was such a huge hit, studios are greenlighting Stephen King projects left and right because they know they want to make that money. But everyone I talked to with this film, I talked to the directors, I talked to the producers, and I talked to two of the cast members, and everyone is clearly approaching this as they would approach like an Academy Award nominated movie. That's how seriously they're taking this. And just hearing that made me like so excited.
And you kind of alluded to this a little bit, but like, how is this film going to be different than the previous Pet Sematary film adaptation?
So, the original film, the 1989 film, was fairly accurate to the book because Stephen King actually wrote the screenplay, but it left a lot of stuff out. And in talking, with the producers and the filmmakers, it's clear that they're both going for a film that's accurate. They're going for something that's true to the book, and they're even putting stuff in here from the book that wasn't in the 89 film. But at the same time, they're taking a somewhat different approach. The trailer dropped today, and anyone who's seen the trailer today and read the book will notice a few things that definitely aren't in the book that are in the trailer. But the way they're approaching the characters is a little different. They're clearly giving the mother character, Rachel, her name is Rachel, they're giving her a lot more to do than she has in the 89 film. They're expanding the character of Judd, played by John Lithgow, in this film a lot more. He's the neighbor character who tells them about the Pet Sematary. Like, they're changing his motivations a lot. They're giving him sort of different backstory than he has both in the book and the 89 film. So it's interesting. Like, they're staying very true to the spirit of the book, but they're also not being rigid about it. And, I'm a huge fan of the book, as I said, but I'm fine with, something different. And I really like what I'm seeing here. And
we've heard that it's going to be not like, there's not going to be like CGI cats in this film.
Yes. Yeah. So one of the things they talked about was the directors, they made an independent film called Starry Eyes, which is a really unsettling but also very low budget sort of horror film. And one of the questions that came up was, are you approaching this like that? Are you approaching this like an indie film, or is this more of like a studio film where it's going to be cheap CGI scares? And they said they want to make this as practical as they possibly can, and they assured us there are no CGI cats in the film. Anyone who's seen the original film or read the book knows a cat plays a big part in the story. And so they're working with several real cats all playing the same cat. And they told us they realized that, they wish they hadn't made that choice because cats are not exactly easy to train, but they stuck with it. And there's definitely going to be a real cat in the film.
And I remember at Comic-Con talking to you in close quarters about your visit, and you were telling us about finally getting to see and step into the actual pet cemetery.
Yeah, so this is sort of like a running joke I have in my write-up report, but that was like the biggest thing I wanted to see was the actual cemetery stuff. Like that was my main goal. And before we even left, like before we even got in the van, I asked, the rep from the studio, like, are we going to see the cemetery? And she said, oh, absolutely. So I was like, oh, I can't wait. So we get there, and first we go to one spot, and then she says, all right, we're going to the pet cemetery now. I was like, oh, awesome. But then she took us somewhere else, and she said, sorry, I made a mistake. We're not going there yet. And I was like, all right, that's fine. So then we leave the second place, and she says, all right, we're finally going to the pet cemetery. And I'm just rubbing my hands together. I'm like, yes, finally. But then she took us somewhere else, and she said, sorry, I made a mistake again. And at this point, I'm starting to think like, oh, she's just lying, and we're never going to see the pet cemetery. But finally, near the end of the visit, she took us to the cemetery, and we got in a golf cart. We drove down this dirt road deep into the woods. Like it's all really in the woods. It's not like a set. It's not like on a sound stage. They really built the cemetery deep in the woods in this rural area of Ontario. And just stepping into the cemetery, it was like a religious experience for me. It like took my breath away because it looks real. It looks like a real pet cemetery that local kids made. Nothing about it looks fake. Nothing about it looks like a set. And it's just there in the woods, and it looks exactly like you picture it when you read Stephen King's book. So it was definitely worth the wait, and the fact that it came near the end of the visit actually made it sort of even more special because I'd been waiting for it all night, and we finally saw it, and I didn't want to leave. Like they let us walk around for like a half hour, and then they were like, "All right, time to go." And I honestly just wanted to stay there like all night. I was so like in my element, but yeah, so it was a great experience.
So Chris is in his element in the middle of the woods in a pet cemetery.
Yes.
But people can read your whole report, Pet Sematary, bringing Stephen King's most terrifying novel to life on /film.com. I'll link it in the show notes. Chris, where can people find more of your work online?
I am at /film.com, and I'm on Twitter at Evangelista413.
You can find me at /film on all social media. You can find all the stories we talked about today in the show notes and on /film.com. This podcast, /film Daily, is published every weekday on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send us your questions, comments, concerns, and feedback to Peter at /film.com. And go to our iTunes page, give us a 5-star rating, and write us a very positive review. It helps us out. Tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll see you tomorrow. So if like Guillermo del Toro announced that he was adapting a Stephen King novel for this service, what is the service called again?
Was it Quibi? I think it's called
Quibi. Yeah. I can't say it without laughing. Would you pay the $5 to watch?
I think I would cheat, and I would email Quibi, and I would say, hello, I'm a journalist. Please give me a free screener of Guillermo del Toro's whatever it is, Stephen King series. But no, I don't. So
basically, the thing that could get you to subscribe the most wouldn't even get you to subscribe.
Yes, yeah, pretty much. I would still cheat. So yeah, no.